I think I was about 15 or 16 when I thought that working in radio might be really fun. I liked project work, I liked doing creative things. Never saw myself as a presenter or anybody who'd be on air. I was very much of the view that I would be a producer, probably working on magazine programmes. And I went off to university, I went to Leeds and I read geography, and I got involved with student journalism there, and I wrote for the university newspaper. I went off travelling after university through Africa for the best part of a year, and then I came back and I thought, well, if I really want to have a go at broadcasting, I better get stuck in. So I rang my local radio station, which is BBC Radio Leicester. So I grew up in Leicestershire, and they very kindly had me in, and I worked for them as an intern, so I didn't get paid for a few weeks. And then I started to do bits of clerical work. Then one day I was asked if I would go and do an interview right in the middle of Leicester, near the Clock Tower, which is a place that a lot of people might be familiar with. It was the launch of a charity to raise money to plant trees in the National Forest in Leicestershire. I had to interview somebody dressed as a tree in a rubber costume, which was not the best, necessarily most auspicious start to a broadcasting career, but I did it. It was live, I survived, I did it quite well. And this radio station said, well, why don't you carry on doing this? And so, having thought that I was going to be very much behind the scenes, I found myself on air, in front of a microphone from the very beginning, and I just loved it.
Building on the idea of teamwork, take everyone through what happens during the day.
I think what presenters must never forget, and what viewers might not realise either, is that a presenter is just the gatekeeper. There are lots and lots of people behind you keeping you on air, so it's best not to upset any of them because they might trip you up. That's never happened, but it could. When you come into the building, usually an hour and a half to 2 hours before I go on air, I go and speak to the assistant editor, who's the person in charge for the evening, who is deciding what the content is going to be of our programmes. And usually our conversation is focused on which are the interviews I'm going to be doing, so I need to do research. So I go off to makeup with a whole sheet of information about the various subjects I'm going to be doing interviews on, and I sit there having my makeup done, thinking about the interviews, thinking about the questions I'm going to be asking while my hair and makeup is done. And then I come back upstairs and I make sure that I'm ready to go on air about 10 minutes before the top of the programme. And underneath my clothes I have to wear this thick, rather unpleasant elasticated belt that holds 2 power packs, one of which powers the microphone and the other powers my talkback, which is what I hear through this curly wire here that sits nicely in my ear, and that's when I can hear everything that's going on in the gallery, which is where the director sits, and the producer, and sound and vision all gets controlled from there. So while I'm on air, I can hear all that noise plus the output and anything that anybody wants to say to me. So you get used to listening to lots of different sources of noise all at once.
One of the key parts of the programmes that we can see you working on is the papers review, where 2 guests come along and talk about the papers. It seems as though there's a lot of thought and effort that goes into preparing that. Can you tell us how that's put together?
We have 2 papers guests who come in at about 9:30 at night, and we tend to focus on the front pages of the morning newspapers. Sometimes we get the inside pages, but mostly it's the front pages because they're the lead stories. They're also the first pages that the newspapers release. The newspapers send those front pages over to us. The producers very carefully print them out, make them up as graphics so that we can show them in good quality on the TV. And with the editor, we decide which stories from the front pages we're going to feature. We usually do about 12 or 13 minutes in the review at 10:30 and again at 11:30. We probably have 5 or 6 stories that we talk about. Our guests tend to be print journalists or broadcasters or authors or lawyers, people with a real interest and understanding of news and current affairs. And I sit with the guests and we have a chat, and I get to know them quite well, and the better I get to know them, the better the paper review will be, because what I want it to be is very much a relaxed conversation. We try and have some fun with it. It isn't really scripted. It's up to me to drive it and to push it in the right direction. I like to let the guests just get on with it and really have as little input as I can. And often it can be quite fun, which is unusual in a news channel because things are often very serious and a bit grim. So it can be a late night conversation that is a bit more entertaining than usual.